We have the power to create the change that we want to see. And the city has a responsibility to inspire people to understand that they have that power as well. And so as we think about what we're doing in terms of these issues, I've collected people, gathered people together to have a mayor's task force on community policing. It has done its initial report. They've done an excellent job, and we made a decision that we brought people from the full spectrum of New Haven, people who didn't necessarily agree with each other, but it created a setting where people from different points of view could look at what our general orders are, what the past practice is, and come up with recommendations to move New Haven to a higher level. And I think that's really, in many respects, what a democracy is. It isn't about a mayor telling you this is what you ought to do, or her staff telling you this is what you ought to do. It's about the community coming together and determining for itself where it wants to go. And so we've got to create settings that allow that to happen. I think it's really important that the community understand that, from my perspective, law enforcement is not an entity that comes in and bears down upon a community. It's the community's tool. And so it's really important that we use the tools that we have, our community management teams, and that we begin to set the standard for what we expect to happen from the police, but as well as from the community. When I was an alderman many years ago, I was on the board for Florence Virgin Homes, and at that particular time, and I would call them the wise women who lived there and who were ahead of that co-op would do is they would bring people in who were misbehaving, and they would say, if you want to continue to live here, then you have got to act right. They didn't need the police to do that. And guess what? Because they made the decision about whether or not they could remain there, people changed their behavior. We've got to get back to a community that holds itself accountable and holds all of our members accountable. We know most of the time who is really creating the negative behaviors in our communities. We know who the people who are doing things that really discredit our communities. We've got to find ways ourselves to hold them accountable. And that the police, frankly, ought to be really the very last thing that we go to, because people respect us enough in our communities to change their behaviors, to adjust to things to the levels that we have set for ourselves we want to live in. We haven't done that yet. We have our community management teams, and it's a structure for us to begin to do that. And I think that we've got to feel empowered enough to say to ourselves, this is the behavior that I expect of you, and that I'm going to hold you accountable. And then when we can't do that, that's when we reach out to the police. And it's really important for me that those police then know who we are, that they know us by name, they know us by what we do, what our commitment is to the community or not, and that they feel like they are our tool and not someone who holds us in some form of bondage. And you know, one of the things I wanted to say about that, when that happens, then you don't have scared cops. Because I think that it's scared cops, and not to use the pejorative word, but they're the ones who, they don't know people in communities, whether they be Black or Hispanic communities. They only know what they've seen, and they're afraid. And when people are afraid, they can do horrendous things. And so that's why it's important that our community and our police force work together, but it really is community first, setting standards that it holds for ourselves as well as for those who are in law enforcement.
Mayor, can I ask you a follow-up question to something you just said? Is it the responsibility of the community to ease the fear of law enforcement, or is it the responsibility of law enforcement to have